So, I watched an interesting podcast, which was the Box Saga from Tinfoil Hat with Sam Tripoli. I'm not sure if he's on YouTube, but he's on Odyssey. So if you look up Tinfoil Hat with Sam Tripoli, and then you look up and you find the Box Saga, BOCK. It's very interesting, and he goes into a lot of the ideas of the ancient kind of Norse mythology and such, and it put a lot of pieces together. Now, of course, this video is only going to be my opinions and my assumptions, so don't take it as fact, but this is basically how I see a lot of this stuff. So after doing some little, passive research every so often, I noticed that it seems like a lot of countries and cultures have been visited by white folk, and sometimes these white folk were giants, and they would kind of think of them as like gods or aliens. And I think that I can't help but think that they weren't exactly aliens in the way that we think of them. Maybe there's interdimensional aliens or something like that, but from what I'm seeing, the aliens have usually been these people who lived in the north. Where in the north? Well, I mean the North Pole. And supposedly a while back, in the North Pole, the sun actually, it wasn't frozen because the sun was up more north, so that the North Pole wasn't frozen, and then slowly the sun went down, and it like does these cycles. So if you were looking on a flat plane, the sun would go outer more to the South Pole, and so it does that cycle. It goes outer more to the south and inner more to the north, depending on if it's a golden age or a frozen age. Golden age would be when the sun is more north, FYI. So supposedly in the past, places like Africa, for example, and I think parts of the Middle East or whatever, were actually forested. I don't know if it was forested, but they had a lot of greenery, supposedly. That would have been when the sun wouldn't have been closer to there, so it would have had it more, assumingly more greenery, which would be very interesting. Similarly, the south of the world, if you look on a flat map and you look more to the southern ice ring, it probably would have been more icy, I don't know, and more green down there. Who knows? That's an interesting thing to think about, because it goes into what we're talking about next. And then in the north, you have this city of people who grow hyper intelligent. They become hyper intelligent through living in this interesting place, because they have 24 hours of daylight. The sun never sets in the north. It simply rises and falls like a wave pattern, and they gain great intelligence because they're looking at the stars, and they're looking at the sun, and I don't know how they're looking at the stars. I mean, I imagine like the stars bleed through, even at like daytime, or when it's like their version of night or something. I don't know, but either way, the basically astrology comes from there, because if you go to the north, you can see the North Star, and you can see the whole zodiac, and you can basically see the sun spiraling around, and you get a perfect view of all of this stuff. You can basically just understand it really easily. Ideas of the circle and such. And that's exactly what they would have done. And also, they supposedly learnt agriculture really well. Other things that I've heard is that gold and silver was very easy to find up there. I imagine that, being in the North Pole, there's a lot of mines. There's a lot of, good ore up there. Too bad it's frozen over, of course, so it's difficult to see. But who knows? Maybe I'm sure government agencies are, mining the shit out of it to get minerals and such, probably nowadays. But yeah, supposedly there's so much of that, because if you go to see what happened is the migration when the north started to get too cold and started to, the ice age started to happen and all that. Supposedly the northerners migrated down south, outward, from the North Pole, and then migrated to places like Russia, for example, to Sweden, Denmark, Scandinavia, all those Viking-esque countries, so like the northern tips of Europe, Greenland, or I think it's Iceland. I don't know, whatever the fuck one, probably both, whatever those ones are. All of those kinds of countries. So if you look at, for example, Russia, supposedly you can find like immense amounts of gold, just ruins of gold like everywhere. Apparently, there's I've seen some videos. It's like they're like in Russian. I wish I saved the links, but this guy who travels around and basically finds like hundreds of kilograms of gold just everywhere. Of course, he'd be up to exploring, but there's so much fucking gold apparently, so it's crazy. And assumingly these northern people were really tall. So if you have the old ideas of the firstly the Anunnaki, which we'll get into, the sons of whatever, I forget what they're called, the sons of something. And you have these, the Tartarian folk, which the Tartarian folk are like the descendant, I think, or they are these northern people. I think it also relates to stuff like Atlantis and Lemuria. The idea of Lemuria being like this ancient magic city and all that. It could have been before this, I don't know. This ancient kind of like magical city, which went, I don't know if it went underground or something, or under the sea or whatever, but it could definitely be this like a northern city at the North Pole, like a spherical city or something, who knows. There are also ideas, if you look at like Rudolf Steiner, what he says about Lemuria and Atlantis, that was a time when reality was less dense, it was more fluid. So people were like these fluid beings, which is interesting. You have to kind of piece all this stuff together, you have to do it in your own head. Try to figure that out. Anyway, so eventually they like migrated down south, and then you have all these stories of like the origin stories of like Scandinavia and Finland and all these places being started by like this one person, this one kind of like god or whatever. You also have like tribal stories of different tribes being visited by giant men in suits and like a weird spacesuit looking thing. I don't know how far the technology might have gotten in that northern area. Potentially they could have had flying vehicles, UFOs or something. I imagine they had the minerals to basically create whatever, naturalistic technology. It wouldn't be like super small and printed circuit boards or anything like we have now, but I imagine they figured out levitation, and they figured out all kinds of shit. Because then you have the story of the Anunnaki who went to with like Sumeria or whatever, and supposedly got those people to mine gold from you. What are they doing with gold? These giant bearded men, which apparently had big dicks. That's literally, that's why they have the circumcision thing. At least one of the reasons, supposedly to look like the Anunnaki, who had their heads out, so to speak. So what are they doing mining gold from? Is gold a power source? Is gold, do they eat it? like make it into like medicines or something? What do they do with it? Because they probably had a lot up north, like a lot. So what are they doing with that? You also have the mythology of the Egyptians, supposedly the royalty being red-headed white people. Again, this is back when Egypt would have been, supposedly Egypt wasn't a desert, wasn't, it was more green, as I said. And up there, Samaria and all that, ancient Samaria and Babylon or whatever, it wouldn't have been as deserty. It would have been more green, supposedly, maybe, I don't know, because of the difference of the sun or something. Maybe maybe it was, that was further back, but I don't know. Yeah, so then these giant northerners go out to like different lands. Like, as I said, they become the Anunnaki, and so maybe it's not aliens mixing their DNA with whatever people lived there. Maybe it's just these giant fucking northerners fucking whoever, interbreeding, with the common folk or whatever, and giving them the ideas of agriculture. These stories in these ancient cultures about how giant gods gave them agriculture, taught them how to smith and blacksmith and how to do all this stuff. What's the bet? It's just those. It's like if you look at China, apparently west at the desert, these people, again, red-headed white people, supposedly migrated down through either the western part, which Central Asia, Eastern Europe, or up north around Russia and such. These people migrated through and apparently taught them things like Buddhism and the roots of, which eventually, the roots of Taoism and all these these spiritual traditions and such. They taught them this. When you think about it, astrology, the arts of all this stuff would have been given to them in the north. Being in the north, changes your body, it changes your mind, it makes you develop in very interesting ways, and you develop these systems of knowledge. But yeah, if you look at the Chinese, they say that they got that from them, these white people, and then it spread throughout Asia. So again, of course, everywhere is going to have their own naturalistic spiritual tradition, but of course things spread, knowledge spreads. The Indians, for example, they had a very powerful culture. Back in the day, the Indians were very, very powerful. Supposedly they got it from, I think as well, they said the Chinese got their spirituality from India, so I don't know, maybe the Indians got some of theirs from those northerners that came through. Who knows? Could be something like that going on. So there's all this intermixing of culture and other things and such. So yeah, really the interesting idea of this one is that potentially this great northern culture, as the times change, as the sun changed, we went from a golden age to a lead age, so to speak, dark age. They could have changed and they could have migrated, and whatever the crazy cool stuff they learned, they probably taught and gave to other cultures when they moved. I think we kind of always, this is natural cycle in the world of where knowledge and wisdom gathers at the crown center of whatever, the world, the culture, gathers the city, just whatever, and then it becomes dark and cold and night falls, and then they have to go outward. They have to intermix and spread with the other parts of the world or the body or whatever, and that enlightens and enlivens the other parts, and they then gain knowledge. It's the same thing with how throughout, I guess, the 18th and the 19th century, you have these European universities and such, and European, and then eventually it became American, and also around government agencies and all this kind of stuff that are developing like high levels of technology, like the internet, telephone, whatever screen technology, like computer screens, computers, all this kind of stuff. And then eventually it spreads out through the kind of more common people outside of the agencies and universities, and then it spreads to different countries, and now we have it where you can be in Africa and you can have internet, or you can be in, I don't know, South America or Asia or whatever, and you can talk to people from all over there because the technology is spread, because it's spread out everywhere. So I think you're always going to have these centers of science and wisdom and spirituality and such in certain places, and it's always going to be centered in a certain country or town. Of course, every country and every town is their center of something or other, but specifically it's kind of like the crown chakra, or like the third eye chakra in the world, in the earth, so to speak. And that's kind of interesting, I think. Anyway, that's enough to think about, I think, so I'll end this one. Of course, check the link in the description, and have a nice day.